Pre-algebra lesson relations 4-2. And in today's lesson, we'll be talking about relations as being a set of ordered pairs, X and Y, and we can represent that in words, equations, tables, graphs, or mapping diagrams like you learned from Miss Wheeler yesterday. And so what we're going to be doing today is talking about relations as they relate to each other. And so some of the things that you need to know is about your quadrants here in case you've forgotten. This is called quadrant 1 in this first section. This is called quadrant 2 in the second section here. And this is quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Now, usually we use Roman numerals to represent that. So I'll put that 1, Roman numeral 2, Roman numeral 3, and Roman numeral 4. And so those are our quadrants. And to remember that, just remember we're looking at a coordinate grid. Make your C, and that reminds you that it starts here at first, goes to second, travels to third, and ends up in fourth. So some of the other things you need to know are point of origin. So some of this is review. Some of you may not remember this, some of you may. And point of origin is always located at 0, 0. Your quadrant 1 is always when X, and this is X and this is Y here, when X is 0 and on up, so your positives, and Y is positive as well. So we call this the positive quadrant. When you travel X value from 0 to the left, it gets negative. So your X is negative and your Y goes up, it's positive. These can sometimes help you just knowing where points go. Quadrant 3 is when you travel negatively to the left in your X value and go down in your Y value, so negative, negative. And this quadrant is when you go positive on your X value, but travel negatively on your Y. And so those are your 4 quadrants. And just a reminder, there's a little hint down here that when you write an ordered pair, it's always X and then Y. So we always crawl before we stand or squat. And this kind of directional arrow tells you the X should be going left or right. The Y should be traveling up or down. And so it's just a refresher. And in the world of math, we have 2 words you need to learn, which is domain and range. Just remember, domain is always going to be your X values, and range is any of your possible Y values. So we will be teaching you a song. I'll sing a little bit of it. Home, home on the range. It goes home, home on the range, where the Y is dependent on X, where X is domain, and the Y is the range. And then we'll learn the rest of it later. So I'll sing it again. Home, home on the range, where the Y is dependent on X, where X is domain. X's are your domains. And the Y is the range. And then we'll learn the rest later. But that's the first part of the song that you need to learn. And we're going to continue. So this part of the notes that I just went through, domain and range, this is going to actually go on the left side of your notes. So this is going to actually go on page 42. So you can see I put the page number on the sheet for you. And now we're going to switch over to page 43, which is opposite it, directly opposite. And we're going to talk about relations some more in terms of what do I do with domain and range. And so we're going to look at these points, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. We're going to put it in a table format. We're going to put it in a graph format. We're going to put it in a mapping diagram. That's just the different ways to show it. And we're going to list the domain and range. So we're going to start with our X's here. And remember that our domain is our X. So if you want to think about everything I put first here is going to be domain, and that's my range. Where the X is domain and the Y is the range. That's the first part of the song. So we have X's here, and we just look at all our X's. So my first X here is a 2. And then my next X I have here is a -4. And then I have a -3, and I have a 0. And you may notice that this is not going in order, okay? It doesn't have to. So those are our domains. And then we're going to take a look at our range, which is our y is the range. And it goes here with 6. And then we have -8. And then we have 6. And then we have 4. And then as we continue down the page, we're going to graph it. And so we're going to graph those points. So I'm going to graph them. And so my first point I'm going to graph is 2, 6. And this is kind of faint on here. So I'm going to go 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So do the best you can on graphing that. Sorry, that came out so faint when it printed. And then my next ordered pair is -4, -8. So again, that was in the first quadrant. -4, -8 should be in the third quadrant over here. -1, 2, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to go down 8. 1, 2, 3, kind of hard to see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we're just going to eyeball it. It's going to be right about there. -4, -8. And I might not be exact, but I get an idea. And then the next point is -3, 6. So I'm going to go -1, 2, 3, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you notice, we're kind of all over the place, aren't we? And then the last one is 0, 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so if you notice, it's not connected dots. I'm not making lines. It's just a series of 3 or 4 points. So I have my 4 points there, and it could be any number of points that you put. So it's just asking what's the domain and what's the range. So my domain are all my x values, my y's are my range, and then I just have what the graph looks like. So no pattern there, no linear equations or any of that. Now when we take a look at domain as just writing it, so what I did was I just took all the information that was my x's right here, and I put them into my domain. I just put them in what we call a set notation. So I put these little brackets on either side and I just list them. On range, I just list 6, -8. Oh, I'm missing a number there. It's got 6, -8, 6, and 4. But no, I'm not missing the number because the 6 repeats itself. So I only list it once. So that confuses you going back up here. 6, -8, 6, 4. I only wrote it one time because I don't need to write it more than once. So we're good here. That's the domain. Those are my x's. This is just a refresher. And the ranges are my y's. Mapping it, all that means is just taking the numbers and saying what do they go with. And so my x values are 2. So I'm going to put my domain on this side. -4, -3, and 0. And where does it map to? Well, the 2 goes with 6. I'll map it there. The -4 goes with -8. So I put -8 here and I say, okay, those go together. The -3 goes with 6. Oh, I already have it there. So I draw my arrow up there. And then my 0 goes with 4. So when I'm mapping, I don't have necessarily 4 numbers either because I have a duplicate arrangement. So these are just some of the ways that you represent your relations. And the main focus today is what is domain and what is range. And you need to know the difference. So home on the range, where the y is dependent on x. Y is dependent on x. So that means y is dependent, x is independent. Where x is domain and the y is the range. And we'll do the rest later. So I'm just tempting you just a little bit. So one last time to just reiterate what's going to happen in the classwork tomorrow is you're going to take your points, whatever's given. You're going to put it into a table of values. You're going to graph those said points, and please don't connect them. They aren't connectable. It's not a line. You're going to be then writing the domain, which are your x's in set notation, and your range, which is your y values. A reminder that if your y value repeats more than once, you only write it once. Your x shouldn't appear more than once. We'll talk later about that. And then mapping, of course, this is what the mapping should look like. On the actual assignment, you won't see any mapping, but just understand that this is what this means. I have the 0.26, -4, -8, -3, 6, and 0, 4, and we'll talk more about mapping at a later time. And so right now, that's all you kind of need to know. Best wishes.